shadows of Randonautica, Jason was always up for an adventure, especially when it involved something as unconventional as Randonautica. It was a trending app that promised to take users to locations filled with mystery and potential. Fueled by curiosity and the thrill of the unknown, he decided to try it out with his friend, Clara. They met at a local coffee shop, the air thick with the aroma of roasted beans and sugar-laden pastries. As they sipped their drinks, Jason explained the app. It uses quantum random number generation to give you coordinates based on your intentions, he said, excitement sparkling in his eyes. We can ask it to lead us to something eerie. Clara, intrigued but skeptical, shrugged. Why not? Let's see what it's got. They settled on the intention of discovering something scary, both of them laughing nervously at the idea. After inputting their intention into the app, it buzzed and vibrated, finally producing a set of coordinates just outside of town. They exchanged glances, half in disbelief and half in anticipation. Let's do it, Jason said, his adventurous spirit overtaking his common sense. The sun began to set as they drove towards the coordinates, casting long shadows across the empty road. They chatted about their lives, the day's mundane worries fading into the background. As they approached the destination, they found themselves in an area they didn't recognize. A narrow dirt road lined with thick trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I think this is it, Jason said, glancing at the app's screen. We're close. Clara squinted through the windshield, eyeing a clearing just ahead. It looks weird, she said, unease creeping into her voice. They parked the car and stepped out, the air suddenly cooler and heavier, as if the world around them held its breath. They walked toward the clearing, which was dominated by an old, abandoned cabin. The windows were shattered, and the door hung on its hinges, creaking softly in the breeze. Should we go in? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course, Jason replied, trying to sound braver than he felt as they approached the cabin. Jason felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. The atmosphere shifted, growing thicker, almost oppressive. Clara hesitated at the threshold, her instincts screaming at her to turn back. But curiosity won, and they stepped inside. Inside, the cabin was dark, the only light filtering through the broken windows. Dust motes danced in the air, and a sense of neglect hung heavy. Old furniture lay toppled, and a fireplace stood cold and blackened. As they explored, Jason found a journal on a rickety table, its pages yellowed and brittle. Look at this, he called to Clara, flipping through the entries. Most were illegible, filled with frantic scrawls and erratic sketches. One entry stood out. The shadows come at night. They know our fears. They consume us. Clara peered over his shoulder, her face paling. This is creepy, Jason. Maybe we should leave. Just a little longer, he urged, caught up in the thrill of the moment. They moved deeper into the cabin, the air growing heavier with every step. Suddenly, Clara froze, her eyes wide. Did you hear that? Jason strained to listen, and then he heard it. A faint whispering, like a distant conversation. It seemed to come from behind a closed door at the end of a dark hallway. Let's check it out, he said, adrenaline surging. They approached the door, Clara's heart pounding in her chest. As Jason reached for the handle, a rush of cold air enveloped them, and the whispers intensified, now a cacophony of disjointed voices. He opened the door with a creak, revealing a small, dimly lit room cluttered with strange symbols and artifacts. In the center stood a circle of candles, their flames flickering wildly despite the absence of a breeze. The walls were covered in drawings of grotesque figures and twisted faces. What is this place? Clara breathed, stepping back. Jason felt a pull towards the center of the room, as if an unseen force beckoned him closer. Ignoring Clara's warning, he stepped into the circle. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, and the whispers morphed into screams. The candles flared, and shadows twisted around him, elongating and darkening until they took on a life of their own. Jason! Clara shouted, reaching for him, but the shadows surged forward, wrapping around him like a vice. He felt an overwhelming dread seep into his mind, pulling him into darkness. Faces emerged from the shadows, twisted, tortured visages that stared at him with hollow eyes. "Let go!" he screamed, but his voice was lost in the chaos. The shadows closed in, enveloping him entirely. Clara stood frozen, horror etched on her face as she watched her friend being consumed. With a sudden surge of instinct, she grabbed the journal and hurled it into the center of the circle. The moment it landed, the shadows recoiled. Releasing Jason from their grasp, he stumbled back, gasping for air, and Clara pulled him away, racing towards the exit. The shadows hissed and clawed at them, furious at their escape. They burst through the door and fled into the night, the cabin disappearing behind them as they sprinted to the CART as they drove away. Jason's heart raced, and Clara's hands shook on the wheel. They didn't speak, the weight of what had just happened settling heavily between them. "What was that?" Clara finally whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know," Jason admitted, shaking his head, but it felt real. Those shadows, they were something else. Days turned into weeks, but the incident haunted them both. Clara tried to return to normalcy, but she found herself glancing over her shoulder, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. Jason, meanwhile, became obsessed with the experience, reading about others' encounters with Randonautica and dark energies. One evening, unable to shake the sense of dread, Jason received a message from Clara. "I had a dream about the cabin. The shadows are still there, Jason. They're watching." He felt a chill at her words. "What do you mean?" "They want something from us. I think we have to go back." "No way. We barely escaped," he replied, anxiety creeping in. But Clara's persistence wore him down. She believed they could confront whatever was lingering in that cabin. After days of back and forth, Jason reluctantly agreed. They arrived at the cabin just before dusk, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the landscape. The air felt different this time, thick with anticipation and dread. They parked and made their way to the cabin, every step heavier than the last. Inside, the atmosphere felt charged, as if the very walls remembered their previous encounter. They found the room untouched, the candles still lying where Clara had thrown them. Jason picked up the journal, now slightly damaged but still legible. Clara gathered her courage. "Let's try to communicate with them. Maybe we can end this." With shaky hands, she lit the candles, and they formed a circle once more. Jason felt the shadows creeping back, their whispers weaving through the air. But this time, they weren't afraid. They stood together, united against the darkness. "Why are you here?" Clara called into the shadows, her voice steady despite the fear. The shadows shifted, and a figure began to emerge. A tall, dark silhouette with piercing eyes that seemed to burn into their souls. "You summoned us," it hissed, its voice a chilling echo. "You brought the darkness with you. Tell us what you want," Jason shouted, defiance igniting within him. "Fear feeds us. Your fear is our sustenance," the shadow replied, its voice rising in a cacophony of hisses and whispers. "You cannot escape what you have invited." Clara, heart racing, took a step forward. "We're not afraid of you. We know what you are." The shadow recoiled, its form flickering as if struggling against an unseen force. "You do not understand. You think you can command us?" But Clara was resolute. "We command our fear, and you have no power over us." As the shadows swirled around them, a light ignited in the center of the circle, illuminating their surroundings. The figure writhed, its form contorting in rage. "Leave this place," Jason yelled, the light growing brighter. The shadows shrieked, and with a final pulse of energy, they imploded, disappearing into the ether. The cabin trembled, and the air cleared, leaving behind an unsettling silence. Breathless, Jason and Clara stood in the circle, the weight of the encounter heavy yet liberating. They felt lighter, the shadows no longer looming over them as they left the cabin. Dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm light across the forest. The air felt clean, and the sense of dread had lifted. Jason and Clara exchanged relieved glances, grateful to have faced the darkness together and emerged victorious. They knew they had broken the hold the shadows had on them, but deep down, a lingering question remained. What other horrors awaited those who dared to use Randonautica?